So today I'm going to present to you a paper produced by 4 American scholars, including 3 scholars and 1 industry workers, and they were published in Journal of Applied Psychology, which is very highly ranked journal in 2018. The impact factor was like 5, and it has been ranked 9th out of 82 in the applied psychology category that year. So it's a very good quality journal that I'm honored to share with you. So from this title, we can kind of expect some things. For instance, cross-level investigation kind of suggests there are multiple levels, and it can be possibly quantitative analysis. And the central topic is informal field-based learning. In short, it's called IFBL in the whole study. And then you have the other concept called performance improvements. So it kind of suggests this is a relationship study. So why this study then? Because organizational learning takes place quite a high percent informally, but this research topic is under-researched, and the constructs appeared in this topic kind to be a bit the conceptual boundary kind of a little bit not that clear. So there are several purposes of this paper. So in short, there are 4 of them. So first, as I said, the constructs are not quite clear. So they want to define a definition of IFBL and then clarify the boundary of this definition they're going to use in the study. So second one is they are going to develop a new measure to measure IFBL behaviors. And 3, they are going to advance a grounded theory out of IFBL in particularly health care setting. And the 4 is they are going to test the model with empirical data directly from health care setting in America. So this is the definition of IFBL they came up in this study. That is the base concept they are going to use in the whole study, because IFBL apparently is the central topic of their interest. So they define IFBL as engaging in intentional, self-directed behaviors aimed at learning new, work-oriented, and organizationally valued content outside of a formal learning program. So they restrict this definition to experiences gained in work, basically in work context of an individual. And they, from the literature review, defined 3 sub-dimensions of behaviors of IFBL, namely experimentation, new experiences. Let's constantly seek new tasks, new experiences to experiment with different tasks. And the second one is feedback reflection. So they constantly look for feedback on their complete work. And then the third one is vigorous learning behaviors, meaning that they observe their colleagues and to talk with their colleagues about the work they're doing. So a lot of chatting here. So this is the model they actually proposed in the study. We see 2 levels here. As the title suggested, it's a cross-level investigation. So here we have, let me bring out the pointer. So here we have unit level. This is the higher level, and individual level, that's the lower level. So these are the 2 levels they are going to investigate. So on the first level, which is individual level, they have 3 variables, basically. They have X, which is informal field-based learning, which contains 3 sub-dimensions, as I mentioned. And then they have Y, which is performance at work. So this is a direct relationship they suggest. The hypothesis 1, that is to check the relationship, to suggest that there's a positive relationship between X and Y. And then the second hypothesis is between antecedent variable, which is promotion focus, towards X. So to suggest there's a positive relationship from promotion focus to IFBL. Then we have on the unit level, which is a higher level, you have two moderators. One is staffing levels, so how well staffed a work unit is. And then you have non-punitive climate, which means how tolerant that work environment is towards mistakes made by employees. So the third group, which is third group of hypothesis, which contains two parts, which is the first relationship H3A is to say staffing levels has impact moderate the relationship between antecedent variable and X. The second one is staffing levels moderate the relationship between X and Y. The same thing here for H4A and H4B, and all the relationship and all the relationship here are positive according to their hypothesis. So this is just a very brief view of the hypothesis proposed by this study and the concept model they built to be tested later. Now let's move on to the research design of this paper. So it contains two studies, 4 data samples. The first study, they use 3 samples of data to design and validate their measure of IFBL behaviors. They particularly test the psychometric properties, which means both validity and reliability of this measure. So they spend a lot of time validating their measure to be effective. So the second study is to test hypothesis using hierarchical linear modeling or multi-level I think modeling. Yeah, they have different terms. So in this study, they use HLM as the term. So they use sample 4 to achieve this goal. So this is basically the overall view of the whole research design they're going to go through. So in detail, I listed a table for you to better understand, because this study has very complex research design. They use a lot of data. They complete a lot of testing that is quite a model for everybody who want to develop questionnaire, test the questionnaire based on the model they produced. So this is quite a good example of going through the whole process if you are engaging with the questionnaire design and validation. So as I said before, sample 1, sample 2, sample 3, they belong to the first study. Their purpose is to design and validate their questionnaire, the measure, how effective, how reliable it is. So sample 1 is to distribute their 11-item survey to a group of 32 PhDs and PhD students and advanced undergraduates. And the output is 9-item survey. So they basically use this sample to reduce the items of the survey to make sure it's more accurate according to the people who take it. And this survey is done in the academic world. It's in the academic setting. So in the sample 2, they distributed 9-item survey to a group of 400 individuals on a how you do call it, a crowdsourcing website called Amazon Mechanical Turk platform. On that platform, they recruited 400 users who are from over 20 industries. So it's quite a broad coverage of users. And they gave them the 9-item survey. They did it. And they also gave them some other 4 informal learning surveys, which are widely used to compare the results of these two. And then you have sample 3 and sample 4. They are both in healthcare setting, 2 different samples exclusive from each other. So in sample 3, they further tested their measure using similar methodology, but with different samples. So they have 4 sources of data, including survey 1, survey 2, HR records, and another industrial surveys running by the hospitals periodically. So 4 sources of data were both used in sample 3 and sample 4, but 2 exclusive sample size. and sample pool. So these are basically what happened in this research. And after this, before we jump into study 1, we need to understand for designing and validating a questionnaire, this is just an example of the procedure. So as you see that after you design a questionnaire, you often need to evaluate its reliability and validity. And that's what the one core part of this study. And together, these two concepts are umbrelled with another term called psychometric properties. So later, when I say they are testing psychometric properties, you know what I meant. It's referring to validity and reliability. So reliability is basically evaluate the measure against itself to see how constant it produces the same result from place to place. So let's imagine you use a desk ruler, which is the measure, to measure the A4 paper's length and width. No matter you measure it in Kyoto University or Kobe University, you will produce the same result. So that is a reliable measure, right, to do this task. And then validity is accuracy. So how well this measure can measure what it is supposed to measure. So let's compare two different measures. One is a protractor, which is to use as a tool to measure angles and circles. And on the other hand, you have a desk ruler, which is to measure and draw straight lines. So there are two different tools to measure different things. So if you combine these two concepts, you have 4 scenarios when, as a result when you test your the psychometric properties of your measure. So let's take the first one as example. So of course, the ideal one will be the final one, both reliable and valid. So you use the desk ruler to measure the two size length of the paper. But there are 3 other not the ideal scenarios. First one is you use a desk ruler to measure the angles of the triangle. So that is a reliable tool, but it's not valid for the task. The second one would be you have a broken desk ruler to measure the A4 paper. So it is a valid task, but it's not reliable because the ruler is broken. So something like this. I hope this briefing can help you understand better these two concepts. Let's now jump into the summary of study 1. So a lot of data going on in this paper. First, so how did they develop the survey? So they developed a 9-item survey. So by doing that, how they achieved that? They first, these 4 authors together drafted 20 items, which they perceive as relevant to or proper to measure the construct they want to measure. And they, by eye screening, deleted 9 already. So they have 11 left. And then they use this 11-item survey to distribute to sample 1 people. And they took the survey and they eventually deleted another 2 and it come out with 9-item surveys. But one problem I encountered when I was reading sample 1 part is that they labeled this process as content validity survey. But from my point of view, I feel like it's more like a face validity. For both item generation and sample 1 survey, it's more like they use their eyes to judge if this is relevant or proper. So for me, it's like face validity instead of content validity. Because content validity is you use like a checklist of criteria to check against the reality to see if they are a match. So I would like to discuss this later with you. But now let's continue. So the sample 2, they basically first check the reliability of the measure by reporting the Cronbach alpha. And the result is it's acceptable. And they further to use confirmatory factor analysis to overall check the internal structure or dimensionality of IFBL measure. This has implications for the model good fit between the actual structure of the measure and the actual structure of the model. And the result is it's an excellent model fit. And then they check between, they ask the same sample to take their survey, at the same time take other similar surveys, and they did correlation analysis to see the results are highly related or not related. And they have the outputs as significant correlations. So this is part of the construct validity testing called convergent validity. So this is also validity testing. So sample 2 is basically to test the psychometric properties of the survey. And then they use another sample to do the same thing. And the result is also good reliability, acceptable model fit. So this is the basically factor loading table out of this confirmatory factor analysis. You can see that different items load quite well into different constructs, so prove their reliability and validity of the measure to measure what they are supposed to measure in different samples. So that is basically the end of study 1. Let's move to study 2, shall we? So the study 2 is to test the hypothesis proposed in the model. They follow 3 stages. First, they come up with a baseline model to determine the percentage of outcome variance that resides within and between units. As we said before, there are different units, right? That's the unit level. And then we have stage 2. They include both the lower and higher level linear effects. And stage 3 is to introduce the cross-level moderating effects. So they follow why they chose hierarchy linear model, because they have nested structure of data. And HLM is perfect for testing or analyzing nested structure data with higher and lower level. So when they were running hierarchy linear model, usually 2 models are developed. One that reflects the relationship within lower level units. A second one that model how the relationship within lower level units varies between units. So this is a good choice of analysis. So from this study, in the second study, they have first level 407 employees from 5 hospitals in one region of the USA. And the level 2 is 49 work units within this 5 hospitals. And level 3, of course, is the top level, which is the 5 hospitals. So as you can see that I just demonstrated you with a nested structure. That's what the data structure like. So summary of the study 2. First, they again test how well their measures can be measured by the structure of measure they have. So they have 2 here. There are 2 levels. So first, they check the work context measures, and when you are looking at the reliability of this work context measures, you need to understand it's kind of different from the individual level constructs, because group level constructs are often derived from individual level data. And this procedure requires a composition model. That's one of them is what we see here, reference shift consensus composition method. And this is to specify how well how the lower level data can be combined to compose the higher level construct. So that's what they did. They tested inter-rater agreement calculation. They did ICC's value report. They did the unit level internal consistencies calculation. And the result was basically excellent reliability of the group level means. And then when it moves to the lower level, which is the individual level measures, they follow the similar procedure we introduced in study 1 to report the Cron-Batch alpha, to run the CFA analysis, something like that. Okay, so after that, they started the analysis using two-level hierarchy linear modeling. Follow that 3 stages we introduced earlier, and the outputs are basically well presented in table 4, table 5, figure 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so this we are going to introduce further later. So after the hierarchy linear modeling analysis, they go further to analyze the detail inside this relationship by running exploratory analysis. So they basically replace in the model, they replace the IFBL as X with the 3 subdimensions of the IFBL and rerun the whole process to see how the subfactors of IFBL is related to other variables in the model. And the third one is they try to test the indirect effect posed by promotion focus on Y through X. Okay, so that's basically what happened in study 2. Now let's move to the data to interpret what is the result. So first, before running HLM, they did Pearson linear correlation to check if there really is association between variables that is meaningful for the next analysis. So this is basically prerequisite test of any regression analysis. First, you do linear correlation testing. So according to the testing, there is positive relationship, a significant relationship. But as you can see from the screen, that sex, this they were labeling as a covariate of this study. They also loaded this factor into the correlation table, but I kind of feel it's not proper because first of all, I think sex is a categorical concerning the measurement level, and for covariate, I think only continuous variable can be used. So I think it's a little bit probably not right to use a sex, which is not continuous variable, to be considered as covariate in this study, but we can discuss later. But anyway, this table tells us, okay, you can run HLM. And then we are moving to coefficients and standard errors, table 4 and the table 5. So basically so the first table 4 is to do the HLM analysis of predictors of performance. So any variables before performance, this is where it loads. And this is the second table is the HLM modeling analysis of predictors of informal field-based learning. So any factors before IFBL is loading here. So I was just studying this analysis for the sake of presenting. So if I present something wrong, so we can discuss later. So for instance, my understanding of this table is, let's try to explain. So the level 1, level 2, as you can see from this table, level 1 is the variable like age, sex, tenure, previous performance, IFBL. And level 2 is the rest. So basically, there are 2 types of numbers here, starting from level 1, level 2, cross level. I don't know if covariance is the same, but I think there are 2 types of data here. The data outside bracket is the estimated coefficient, I think. And then inside the bracket is the standard error. So basically, by calculating these 2 together with some other values, they come up with the significance level, which is indicated by the stars after the bracket. So for instance, why the first hypothesis which is a relationship, positive relationship between X towards Y, why it's rejected in this study. Because if you look at the role of IFBL, you have the level 1 linear effects, the same as level 2, not significant, without stars, right? But when you load the cross-level interactions, you see the relationship becomes significant, right? So that means that there's the direct relationship before IFBL and the performance is not that significant to the study. But after you consider the moderation effect, it becomes significant. So that rejects the direct relationship between X and Y in this study. So the second table, the similar thing happened here, which help to support the second hypothesis, which is to say promotion-focused people tend to engage in informal field-based learning more, and that supporting the second hypothesis. And then it also supports the first hypothesis of the third group, the first hypothesis of the third group of hypothesis, which is H3A, which is saying basically the staffing level moderates the relationship between promotion-focused and IFBL, and reject H4A, meaning that the non-punitive climate is not moderating the relationship between the antecedent variable and X. So next, we move to points to plot and regions of significance as presented in 4 figures. And these are 2 very important sets of HLM output that allow for further probing the XZ interaction. So as you can see here. So well, you can see from the square that how to interpret this graph. Basically, I think in HLM, they basically assume linear relationship between variables. So here is the distribution. So the dashed line, the big dashed line is the mean of staffing level. And then the distribution of it, 1 standard deviation above and 1 standard deviation below the mean. So that's that already represent like 68 of values of the moderator. And they basically, well, you can see that from this small figure title, saying staffing levels by informal IFBL interaction as related to post-IFBL performance. Shaded area in the figure represents the range of the observed sample values, while cross-hashed sub areas represents a region of significance with alpha equal 0.05. But I have to be very honest with you. I don't quite well understand this figure, so later we can discuss again. But basically from these 3 figures, they reject H3B, and they partially support H4B, and again they support H3A. So from until now, basically there are 4 groups, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, 4 groups of hypotheses were tested, and the result is out. And I kind of modify the model to be like this. I'm not sure if that's correct, but from my understanding, that's how it is. So the X-Y relationship is supported, and the antecedent variable towards X is supported. And then the first part of the moderator 1 hypothesis is supported. Second half of the 4th group of hypothesis is supported, which resulted into this new figure here. So, but they didn't stop there. As I said before, they want to go further to test different subdimensions of IFBL. how are their relationship with the different variables inside the model they built. So they basically replace IFBL, which is the X variable of this study, but they replace it with three different sub dimensions of the IFBL to be X variable. I rerun the HLM model to analyze the relationship. And there are 5 figures, very similar to what we had before here. So we can discuss later about these figures if anybody is more familiar with this methodology. But let's go to the results in common language so everybody understands better. So first, on the right corner of the slide, you can see, I'm explaining this part of the model now. So basically, first, let's look at the X towards Y relationship moderated by the non-punitive climate. So the result is IFBL behaviors can be positive, but can also be possibly negative. So it's not for sure. There's only a nuanced relationship was found between X and Y. So very small relationship. And this relationship was caused by the amplifying effect of the moderator of non-punitive climate. And it's not like this relationship, this moderation effect is continuously the same. Actually, when you reach a lower level of the non-punitive climate, it instead demonstrated a negative IFBL performance relationship. So let's move to the antecedent variable towards X towards Y. So the result is any indirect effect was negated from promotion focus through IFBL to performance. So the indirect relationship from promotion focus towards Y was cancelled along the process, basically. And only nuanced the relationship between promotion focus and IFBL and performance change. So now let's go to the moderation effect of staffing level and the relationship between promotion focus and IFBL. So staffing levels has a strengthening effect on the promotion focus towards IFBL relationship. Basically, it means it promotes engagement in IFBL behaviors. And remember earlier, they were replacing the X variable with its subdimensions. And that result proved that the promotion focus towards IFBL moderation was attributable to vicarious learning and experimentation subdimensions, not to the other dimension, which is the feedback, I think, is a feedback, something like that. And the second one is another result is the moderator of 1 towards the relationship between X and Y. So here, it's a very different result compared to earlier, the staffing level moderation on the antecedent variable towards X. In fact, here, staffing levels has a weakening effect instead of a strengthening effect on the IFBL performance change relationship. So which means it nullifies the impact of IFBL behaviors on job performance. And this was positively moderated by staffing levels. So it attributed to to different two subdimensions, but in reversed effect. So attributed to experimentation positively, but attributable by the vicarious learning negatively. So this kind of gives the action grid to engage for those promotion-focused employees to how they can engage with the IFBL in an organization. So you can see the staffing level on the top and non-punitive climate on the vertical line. So if you are in well-staffed unit, but it has punitive climate, you should not engage with the even you are actually even you are engaging with a vicarious learning as a promotion focused employees, you probably will receive a lower level of performance rating from the supervisor, because they will think, because if you remember what is vicarious learning, that is to talk with the colleagues, understand what they are doing, discussing with them what they are doing. This behaviors kind of was interpreted by the managers as a slacking, so they kind of rate them lower. So there are some implications for theories and practices, basically repeating what was presented before. Two different levels of implications. For individual level relationship, it's kind of to say, when you are promotion focused individuals, you are more likely to engage in informal field-based learning, and will do so more readily in well-staffed units. And IFBL is only significantly related to changes in job performance when in the non-punitive climate, as well as in the presence of poorly staffed units. So when there are not enough people working in the same unit. So on the cross-level interaction, implication is engaging in IFBL behaviors in the absence of a suitable context could actually be associated with detrimental changes in performance, whereas engaging in IFBL behaviors in a suitable environment will be advantageous. So practical implications including under certain circumstances, organizations can benefit from employees engaging in informal field-based learning, but it's not always the case that the performance will be improved based on the manager's rating. Perhaps more formal like trainings and coachings will help to increase employees' readiness to engage in more this kind of behaviors. And then it is suggests that organizational development efforts should be in position to address these obstacles and create more positive conditions for people to engage in IFBL. And well-staffed units may well enable promotion-focused people to engage in more, to observe colleagues, talking with them, this kind of behaviors, and also experiment with the different tasks for new results. And this all can benefit performance improvement. So future research directions, because this paper is very, let's say, a little bit cross-sectional instead of longitudinal. So they suggest in the future longitudinal research design should be implemented to see if this model still stands. And the data sample is, as I said, from one region of USA, from 5 hospitals under the same consortium. So the data pool is restricted to that region, to that sample. Later, other data samples should be implemented to test the model again. And then other suggestions, including you should expand the scope of individual differences to include other moderators and something like this to enrich the models by introducing new elements. Thank you very much.